fairness. Mr. Speaker, can my honourable friend, tell me how he will deal with a young, handsome, intelligent, charismatic politician such as myself? And how can Parliament really better engage ordinary people in the political process?
Well, I've always thought that my honourable friend was a model to follow. I've never quite managed it myself, but can I say to him that I think the best way that we can make progress is to continue with the strong economic growth and the investment in our public services that have seen across the whole of the public services every single indicator improve since 1997.
David Cameron.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The first issue that the Prime Minister and I are going to have to work together on is getting the good bits of his education reforms through the House of Commons and into law. That's the problem with these exchanges. The chief whip on the Labour side shouting like a child. Now, has she finished? Have you finished? Right. We both agree that schools with greater freedom produce the best results. Will he confirm that all of the freedoms for schools in the White Paper will survive into the bill?
Yes, Mr. Speaker. It is important that we give schools the freedoms that they need, and I'm delighted to hear that he supports these reforms. I assume, therefore, the Conservative Party will be voting for them.
Absolutely. With our support, with our support, the Prime Minister knows there is no danger of losing these education reforms in a parliamentary vote. So he can afford to be as bold as he wants to be. That's when he's at his best. Now, or so I'm told. Now, can we agree that that means trust schools, owning their own buildings and land, employing their own staff, setting pay locally, developing their own culture and ethos, and controlling their own admissions?
Of course, it means all those powers that presently are available to foundation and voluntary aided schools being extended to other schools as well. That's the purpose of the proposals. Incidentally, I should have, before I answered any question, welcomed him to his new position and congratulated him on winning the Conservative leadership election. But can I tell him where I feel we may, and I'm sorry to say this, have a disagreement? And that is, as I understand it, his position, though, is to say that all schools should be free to set their own admissions procedures. I'm afraid I believe the present admissions code should remain in place. So perhaps we could just clear up that too.
David Cameron.
I want schools to control their own admissions. That's what's in the White Paper, and let's see it turns into the bill. Now, it's only our first exchange, and already the Prime Minister is asking me the questions. This approach is stuck in the past, and I want to talk about the future. He was the future once. Education is one of the public services in desperate need of reform. So will he agree with me that our aim should be to make sure that all schools have these freedoms? Will the Prime Minister ensure that this is one reform where he won't look back and wish he had gone further?
Well, I certainly can say, as I said before, that it's important that all schools get these freedoms. However, it is obvious that we disagree on the issue of admissions. I think that if schools are free to bring back selection at the age of 11, that would be regressive for our country. And so I'm afraid in this grand new consensus we have to disagree on that point. The other point, though, that I think is very important is this. We've also got to keep the investment going in our schools. Now, as he knows, the Conservative Party voted against that investment. But I have to say it's that as a result of the investment and the change through specialist schools and city academies and the literacy and numeracy strategy, we've now got the best ever results at 11, at 16, at 18 in our schools. And therefore I have to say to him that it's not merely in respect of education policy we've got to agree, we've also got to agree that the investment that is so necessary to back up that reform continues. And I'm afraid his economic policy, which is actually to cut back investment because of his desire. Yes. Well, I'm happy if this is another policy he's about to change, but he is saying that this year he would not have put all the investment in, but rather have shared that investment half and half between tax cuts and investment. As a result of that, that would mean substantial cuts in public investment. And therefore, I'm very happy to have this new consensus with him, and I'm delighted that today he said the Conservative Party will vote for these education reforms, but it has to be on the basis, I'm afraid, of agreeing the investment also.
Sadiq Khan. Order. Sadiq Khan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would my right honourable friend like to comment on the experience of Mr. Chutton, a Tooting resident who unfortunately was sick on Sunday and had to go to St George's? He had an ECG, 2 types of blood tests, X-rays, various blood pressure tests taken, and was treated by doctors and nurses wonderfully. He said, "This is the first time I've used the A&E. I was thoroughly impressed with the hospital and the conscientious staff." Does he not agree with me that if the members of the opposition are serious...
No. I think the Prime Minister will be able to answer. He'll have an answer.
Of course, the type of improvement that my honourable friends describe is improvement that's happening right across the National Health Service at the present time. It's extremely important that it continues, and that is as a result of both, again, the investment and reform, which means that over the past 8 years, waiting lists have come down now by almost 400,000, and we have the lowest waiting list this country has had since records began.
Charles Kennedy.
Mr. Speaker, the United States Secretary of State yesterday said that extraordinary rendition had been conducted in cooperation with European governments. To what extent, therefore, has his government cooperated in the transport of terrorist suspects to Afghanistan and elsewhere, apparently for torture purposes?
First of all, let me draw a very clear distinction indeed between the idea of suspects being taken from one country to another and any sense whatever that ourselves or the United States or anyone condones the use of torture. Torture cannot be justified in any set of circumstances at all. The practice of rendition, as described by Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice, has been the American policy for many years. We've not had such a situation here, but that has been the American policy for many, many years. It, however, must be applied in accordance with international conventions, and I accept entirely her assurance that it has been.
Speaker, given that assurance from the Prime Minister, could he therefore explain why the now published evidence shows that it's almost 400 flights which have passed through 18 British airports for the period of concern? Could he therefore tell us when was he, as Prime Minister, first made aware of this policy, and when did he approve of the policy?
First of all, in respect of airports, I don't know what he's referring to. Secondly, however, in respect of the policy of rendition, that has been the policy of the American government for many years. Well, the honourable gentleman says why. I think it is just as well to remember that some of the people we are talking about are people that we need to detain for reasons of action against international terrorism. Some of these people are highly dangerous. Some of them can provide information that is of absolutely fundamental importance in preventing terrorism. There should, of course, be proper treatment of anyone detained, and I've already made it clear, so far as I'm aware, it is not an issue here. However, I would say that the American policy on this has been clear for ages. That is not a matter of contention, and what Secretary of State Rice said yesterday, I fully endorse.
Rosemary McKenna.